We all start out the same way. We all start out as babies. But that makes us an instant son. In my case, a brother of two sisters. I was a grandson. In a big Italian clan, that meant that I was a godson. I was a nephew, a cousin to more than a dozen baby boomers. Baby boomer is something that my generation has been called often and has a lot of meaning. As a visual guy, I see these things in terms of banners or headlines, what I tend to think of as labels in front of me. Son, brother, cousin, grandson. A lot of you would react to the word label and think that it's a negative thing. But I find that the label can be liberating, can be defining. But you might ask me, Daniel, is there a label that you've ever had that you weren't happy with, or you weren't pleased with, a negative label? And I'd say, yes, there was. When I was in grade school, I had a hard time reading, and I was labeled remedial. And that remedial reading label is a label that is a fast track to the back of the room, to the remedial table. And I was stuck there pretty much through my whole school career, and I struggled with it, as you can imagine. It wasn't until I was a sophomore in college, when I went for yet another speed reading course, that a young lady, a TA, talked to me for just a few minutes, and she said, Daniel, you're dyslexic. Dyslexic. I had never heard the term. I didn't understand what it was, but when she explained it to me, I thought, wow, dyslexic. That's something that I can deal with. That's something that I can work to overcome. So in that case, a label liberated me. I was dyslexic, and it was a problem that I could work on. And from that moment on, I was able to overcome some of the difficulties I was having and become a better student. A label that I was very proud of as a young man. I could draw very, very well, and everyone said I had great artistic potential. I was a young man with great artistic potential, and I was very proud of that. It was a label that I wore just about up here. And I endeavored all my life to try to develop that artistic potential. There was a problem, another thing that I had, a label that I wish I hadn't had. Depressive. I struggled from when I was very young with horrible depression and moods, but wasn't aware of it, again, until I was much older. I was in my early 30s. I was in the hospital and I came under the care of a psychiatrist for the first time, and he said to me after a short evaluation, Daniel, you're bipolar depressive. Bipolar depressive disorder. It put everything into perspective for me. I was bipolar depressive. Well, I can understand that. And I said, doctor, I could live with that. I could figure out how to deal with that. It liberated me, in a sense, to be able to move forward. And I was able to set goals for my life and start to work on becoming the artist that I had all the potential to be. At some point in my life, I was a Boy Scout. And as a Boy Scout, I realized I loved to hike and to camp. In the outdoors, I became a woodsman. I had an uncle that took care of me after my father had died, and he taught me to hunt, and I had facility for shooting. And later in my life, I became a marksman. So I was an artist and a nephew and a cousin and a marksman and an outdoorsman, and all these things were the sum total of what I was becoming as a young man. One day in Dallas, Texas, I met Ankana, and I was fortunate enough to become a husband. Probably the proudest label that I wear. An outgrowth of that was I became a father. With her help and with her patience and with her guidance in moving to Raleigh, I realized my ambition of being an artist. I got a studio at ArtSpace downtown. And for the first time, I was a portrait painter, Daniel Bodie portraitist. And I worked hard at it, and I enjoyed it, and I felt fulfilled. Then came a time when being a son had particular meaning for me. My parents became very ill, and as their illnesses progressed and they became critical and then terminal, I took on a lot of different roles that perhaps I didn't want. I became a nurse. I became a chauffeur. I became a physician liaison. I became a caregiver, a provider. And the weight of those things were labels and titles that weighed me down. And there came a day when I couldn't sustain that and work on my painting too. So I packed the painting away. Being a good son meant more to me at that point in my life. But that time passed as they passed.